stimulus from interest rate cuts over the last couple of years. Look, I think it's a hangover from the GFC. Consumer caution is still out there. There actually is an aversion to taking on debt, and it certainly also throws up the structural and underlying issues, the supply-side impediments that are also cruelling the recovery.
So why have you still got those supply-side impediments? What exactly are you talking about?
Well, what I'm talking about there is things like state land release programs, high and inefficient developer charges, and a very complex development approval process. So these sorts of bottlenecks and impediments have been, spoken of by master builders and other groups for quite some time. In fact, we've had governors of the Reserve Bank and ministers of governments talk about them. And look, there's been some moves in the right direction. There's been some positive, some improvements, as I said, but it's really a long way to go. On the demand side, I think it goes back to just a cautious consumer, and for this stage of the cycle, it is disappointing in terms of the pickup in approvals.
Because I suppose a lot of people would have said if you start to see house price gains as we have, and I guess the pace of some of the gains at the moment is pretty impressive, it does make it more affordable for developers to go back in there and to build more homes. And in part, that's what the Reserve Bank's trying to do, to inflate house prices and to help building. The problem really seems to be, and people just can't get their heads around, why it's just being so slow off the mark. I think it's still hard to answer that question.
Well, you're right. It is critically important that we do get some positive house price growth, and for developers and participants in the industry to believe that there will be, a reasonably steady increase in house prices in the future. So, I mean, that is a good development, and after we've had a pretty weak period for house prices, there's really correction, and the solid gains we've seen in some capital cities, as you say, is actually a needed ingredient to ensure that we do get some increase in house commencements, and therefore flowing through to completions. In other words, adding to Australia's capital stock, because we have been underbuilding for quite some period of time, at a time when we've had strong population growth. So we have a deficit of housing, and first of all we need to ensure that we have a long-lived, strong upturn in residential building, and at this stage we're just really at the early stages, and the consumer is still very fragile.
Peter, we're talking in a second about some of the changed interest rate forecasts. For example, from the NAB today, they say that we won't actually see a rate rise now until 2015. Now, is a period of steady rates, maybe there's one more rate cut in there, but just in general terms, if we've got relatively steady rates between now and 2015, will that be enough? Or is there a fiscal response that at this point should be more carefully considered?
Look, turning to rates, certainly, as I said before, we're coming from a very low base, and it's been a particularly weak upturn. So yes, we've seen some growth over the past 12 months, perhaps 5-10%, varying by market to market. But if that was seen to be flagging, then I think the Reserve Bank does need to stand ready to quickly cut rates again. Having said that, let's hope that the August rate cut and a more confident consumer and a change in business sentiment, and we'll get some stats out on that next week, I think, will actually encourage this recovery to gain traction, and therefore it's just as you say. I think stability in interest rate policy setting would be certainly the thing that we'd like to see to underpin, as I said, a much needed strong upturn in residential building.
And just finish off with these numbers that we've been talking about today in building approvals are for August. Just anecdotally even, are you finding there's been much of a pickup, say, in September, and now we're starting to get into October?
Disappointingly, no. We surveyed our members at the national level, and their current conditions are still weak, and there's a little pickup in sentiment and confidence about the future, but it's nothing to write home about.
Thank you so much. Peter Jones, Master Builders Chief Economist, thanks for coming on the show today.
You're welcome.
It's Peter Jones there. Now, coming up, financial